Good afternoon, everyone. I am excited to be here, and I'm just going to make this very, very short. Scripting African Children for Success in the Diaspora. Well, my name is Wilfrid Laurier. Here are some of my innovations over the years. I work creating practical solutions to complex family life problems. So while I might not be in the academia, I love to go to the field to know exactly what is happening and then to solve the problem. My first stint was when I left school, university. I was taking a walk around the streets of Ajegunle. Ajegunle is like a notorious ghetto in Nigeria. And I saw 13-year-olds prostituting. And I felt there was something I could do. So the following day, I disguised as a customer, and I went into the red light district, and I started talking about prostitution. I mean, we became very successful that the Association of Brothel Owners had a meeting, and they placed a price tag on my head, and nobody must allow me get into any hotel in that area of Lagos. So that was where I started from. But by working with the girls, I discovered that over 300 girls, I discovered that there was not one of them who was not sexually abused. And there was no content about sexual abuse in Nigeria. So I went into the field again, created the first sexuality education in Nigeria, complete with songs, very interactive, very creative, and a lot of parents used it. And over time, created quite a number of innovation that is being used across different countries right now. Okay, so let me get into my presentation. And I'm going to start by asking a question. Since we're talking about the African kids and how to script them for success. Now, if every African child in the diaspora is handed over to the tribe of ISIS, let's say for the next 10 years, what do you think? Who do you think you're going to become? Any one word that comes to your mind? Terrorist. Terrorist. I mean, everyone says that everywhere I go, right? It's so easy to know the answer, right? Now, if you hand them over, maybe they were adopted by the king of Dubai, for 11 years. Who do you think they're going to become? Hey, you live in Dubai. Royalty, very easy. I mean, everybody says the same thing. Now, if you do the same thing with Japanese parents, right? You hand over the children of Africa to Japanese parents. 6 things will happen. 1, they will have a value of doing their best. 2, they're going to have respect for others. 3, they're going to walk in groups. 4, they're never going to give up. And 5, they're going to know their roles. Because those are the fundamental values of the Japanese race. And because it's well taught from the family, the educational system is built on it, they become very, very successful that when you hire a Japanese, you know what to expect. Now, the biggest issue that we need to begin to address is why are Indians, Jews, Japanese, Chinese, and the Emiratis are able to effectively produce a predictable result that Africans are not able to produce? Because these guys have done it. My family lives in Brampton, Canada. I live in the US. And Christmas was last year. I came home for Christmas, and I was asking my wife if there was Christmas in Brampton, and she said, "Have you forgotten that we live in an Indian community?" Because I didn't see the lights, I didn't see everything. That these people could work together. But we have not been able to produce that result. Those are the things I quickly want to look at. Now, the answer is very simple. They've been able to do these things because of what we call systems intelligence, powered by village scripting. I mean, incidentally, we say in Africa that it takes a village to raise a child. The only problem is that if you send your child back to the villages in Africa, your child will be worse off because we have not intentionally documented, who we want our children to be. We do not have a format, and we do not have a curriculum that is uniform that can produce a predictable end. So while it might be very comfortable to point accusing fingers at this is what this person has done, that's what this person has done, go to a typical family. I mean, if you talk about abuse in the society, the first line of abuse happens with parent-to-children relationship. When the child is born in Africa, what do we say? If that means we ask the question, boy or girl, that's the first question we ask. If you say it's a girl, you're going to tell the man that you're a very lazy man. Your wife has born you. Now, if you say it's a male child, you would say, wow, strong man, you have succeeded and things like that. This is a little conversation, and that's where it starts from. So it's systems intelligence powered by scripting. Now, these are researches that have been done. Some of you are familiar with this. The black children are more likely as likely to be arrested. But the data shows this disparity is not because black kids are committing more crime. Mother Jones report, black youths are burdened by a presumption of guilt and dangerousness. I mean, it's almost like stereotyping. You are not likely going to fly down because you're black. And I don't like the concept of you're black, you're white. I love to describe myself as a human being who came out of Africa. And that's why the concept of we're immigrants. Sometimes I find it very derogatory. I never address myself as an immigrant in the diaspora. Everywhere I announce myself, I say I'm praiseful, I'm an expatriate, who work in the US. Because every time the whites have come to Africa, we never refer to them as immigrants. We call them expatriates, we call them slave masters. So I came here with competence. I didn't come here as a blockhead with empty head. I came here because I had something to have, value to have. So you cannot look down on me with all the competence that I carry and reduce me to my skin color or whatever. So if you don't define what people call you, then they are right to call you whatever they have to call you. Now, how do they see us and how do we see ourselves? I just talked about that. Are we immigrants or are we expatriates? Now, I did a research a couple of years ago, understanding what other minorities who have gotten it right. Because many of the things we complain about, the Indian community is not going to complain about these things, right? And so these were the things I found out. That number one, when Africans are leaving Africa, we are migrating for safety and better life. Because back home, it's very tough. So, I'm sure in Nigeria, for example, if our leaders have gotten it right, maybe some of us would have stayed back. So when we are leaving, we're basically running. But when some of these other guys are leaving, migration is a strategy for occupancy and influence. The Indians, we talk about the Indian agenda even in the diaspora, right? We don't talk about the African agenda in the diaspora. Number two, education for opportunity and relevance. Now, we love to go to school. We take first degree, second degree, but why are we taking the degrees we're taking those degrees for? For them, for us, it's education for opportunity and relevance. For them, it's education for relevance and indispensability. To say, we're not just going to study any course, we're going to study a course that will make us indispensable to you. And if I'm indispensable to you, you will have no option than to work with me. Number three, we migrate as a result of threat to humanity. They migrate as a strategic extension of their frontiers to other spaces. Now, when we migrate, there's no visible agenda and there are no coordinating units. So I stepped into Ivan, Texas. I couldn't find the Nigerian community, I couldn't find the black community. I tried to start one. We had like 2-3 meetings, then everybody began to say, I'm busy. But if I was an Indian, if I stepped into those communities, I'd probably find a village. In fact, last December, we're going to move out in Brampton, I think, no, November. And we saw a particular house that had about 11 Indian families. That was the first time I would see the sitting room, the living room becoming a bedroom, because I literally saw a bedroom there. And I was asking the question, and they told me that when they came in, all of them decided to stay in one house. But now they were moving out because everyone is okay, that each one has bought like three houses, so it was okay for them to move out. Now, for many of us, for two families to live in the same house, it's almost like World War III for many of us. And we need to be very, very frank with that. Next one is, we do individual parenting with no documented heritage template that can deliver a predictable outcome. They do institutionalized parenting template with clear national values that govern outcomes. Next, we do a lot of emotions and raw material intelligence. They do more systems intelligence. And if you understand systems, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you put in the input, you produce an output. Lastly, we have an effective power and command center scripted to compete against our peers and breed distrust. It's in our prayers. Even when we pray as Africans, our prayer is, God, let me succeed. We don't talk about us. Let us succeed. Now they talk about us a whole lot. So if I'm singing and we have a song in Africa, I am the first one, I'm the number one, you are the number two. I'm the first to testify to the goodness of the Lord. So even when I come first in school, my parents are happy. They never bother about my friend who has come last, who will likely repeat that class. You're able to move on. These are fundamentals that we don't like to talk about. So ineffective power command, scripted to compete against peers and distrust. And that's why you can see two Africans come together and both of them want to vie for mayorship. The person that will step down for the other becomes the problem. No one is going to step down till other races are able to take over. Next, but for them, effective power and command center built on super and peer synergy model. Now, the distance between our present reality as African parents and the future of our children is intentional scripting of the future African immigrants using an engineering system powered by intentional parenting to create outcomes. Now, every successful race, follow me, I'm going to begin to share solutions shortly, is powered by intentional systems, while others are powered by emotions. And there are 4 battle lines you need to pay attention to. Identity, history, the village, and the mission. Now, you see, there is something called systems intelligence, which, having worked a lot in Africa and having worked across the different parts of the world, the difference is basically systems. We love a lot of emotion. Now, in the anatomy of the system, there are 4 things you need to understand. 1, the characteristics of any good system has an entry point, which is the recruitment, how people get into the community. Now, in that, you have the engagement strategy and you have the retention strategy. Well documented, well articulated, very intentional. Then you have the indoctrination system, which is the acculturation system. Why do you come to Canada and they tell you that your degree is not enough? You need to go back to school. It's an acculturation process. You need to think in a particular way. If you go to the UK, it's the same thing. Now, if you are a Jewish parent, you understand that parenting has a 14-year curriculum that terminates at a festival called Bat Mitzvah, which means if you pick a typical 7-year-old, 8-year-old Jewish child, you know what to expect. My friend bought a house in Canada, $1.3 million from a 22-year-old Jewish girl. So we interviewed the girl to say, how were you able to afford that kind of a house? And she said that when the Jewish child is born, the grandfather takes insurance policy for the child and begins to pay the premium till 18. By the time the child is 18, the grandfather hands over the wealth to the child. Now, we are basically Christians and Muslims in Africa. We quote, a good man leaves inheritance for his children's children. We quote it. They know it's the code. They've implemented it in a system format. So why won't wealth be transferred? I mean, these are fundamentals that we need. So, an acculturation system, which is curriculum and tools, transition point to say at what point does the child live on, and how does he live on, then how do we deploy a child and how do we make them formidable? So this is a triangle of life I love to talk about in parenting. This is what our reality looks like right now. If you ask a typical African parent, who do you want to raise? They will tell you, I want to raise a royalty, who will become a global influencer. What do you believe? My child is a royalty. But you ask them, how? Then they will begin to tell you, I'm going to pray. Now, and that's the only thing we understand. So if you pray, what happens next? Right? So this is what we do. We do shouting and outburst. We command the child. Emotional rules and regulations. The child doesn't even know. Sometimes you get beaten for what you don't understand. Right? And we create a lot of comfort. It says, because of you I'm working out. It's because of you I'm working out. Then anger and spanking. Then we expect this input to produce this output. The question is, can this input produce this output? It's never going to happen. So the problem is, many parents know who they want their child to become, but they don't know who they need to become for their child to become who the child needs to become. And that's where the problem is. So, having said all of this, I'll quickly define parenting. The word parenting is from the word bring forth, right? So I love to define parenting as the ultimate parent that parent can support their arrow's identity in this quiver and intentionally groom and shoot in the direction of a predetermined target in a way that the arrow consistently solve the problem it was designed to solve in service to God and humanity. That's my own definition. So here are the battle lines. If we really want to script African children for success in the diaspora, 1, we need to define our identity. Who is an African child? He has to be defined. If the definition in Canada is different from the definition in America, we already lost the battle because an Indian is an Indian anywhere in the world, right? But if an African, we're still thinking of a Malian, I am Somali, I'm from Somalia, I'm from this. It's any time I see my African brothers, I'm very comfortable with them, right? I've met them for the first time, but you think that we've known for all the ages. That's the way I say it, because we live by the ideology called Ubuntu. I love it. That's what drives my organization. I am because you are. There's no me without you. Whatever I do against you, I do against myself, right? So who do we say we are, and what does that mean exactly? The variant agenda, because your children are living in the diaspora. I mean, I've interacted with a lot of African youths here. The problem is they don't know anything about their family back home. And here is not accepting them. So they are literally floating. Now, when you don't have a history of your heritage, you don't know anything about it, and here is not accepting you, then drug use becomes your next point of call. You begin to look for something to fill the vacuum within you. Then the lack of intentional and articulated identity, which brings identity crisis, we need to solve that problem. Number 2 is our history, which is another battle line. What is our heritage? I tell people that I am a descendant of a generation of the people that built the first smartest city in the world. It's called Benin City. They built a wall that was bigger than the wall of Berlin, bigger than the wall of China, right? It was a group of people that when the British invaded Benin, they defeated the British army before they went to regroup. Those are the parents that brought us forth, right? We can no longer define ourselves by the present African leaders. So we need to articulate our heritage Then what story are we telling ourselves and telling our children? If we keep projecting the narrative, it is colonialization. Our children will come back for this conference 30 years down the line and will repeat the same thing. Are we going to continue to share, except there is profit in regurgitating that narrative? If it's not profitable, then we need to drop it and begin to redefine the future. Then, the village system. Where is the supporting system? If I land in Waterloo, I should have an African community that can welcome me and show me the way. There is no glory. I was moderating a session for African parents in New York, and the younger ones were telling me that the older ones are not showing them the way. And the older ones are telling me that if they show them the way, they will not appreciate the price they pay, that they need to suffer what they suffer. And I said, what kind of generation is this that expects every generation to suffer what you suffer? Now, that is what we're dealing with. So, who are the custodians and what system powers it? She talked about the elders. Who are the elders? Where are they? Right? Because if a generation doesn't have elders, then you don't have people who can tell you history. And what is the parenting template that we are going to embrace as Africans? And the last thing is the mission. The mission is, why are we here? Why are Africans in the diaspora? What does success mean to us? And who do we represent? Now, I'll tell you 5 things we need to do. Number 1, we need to do what we call a personal heritage audit. What that means is, what is common to Africans? What's common to heritage? Are we pioneers? Are we connectors? Are we managers? Are we marketers? Right? We need to articulate that to say, maybe every African here is an influencer or something like that. It needs to be very clear. Not number 2 there, what could have been that wasn't with you and what went wrong? So we need to do a roadmap analysis. Process our pain. I take people through healing therapy. Process our pain and heal. Right? Because everything that happened to us happened for us. It didn't happen to us. It depends on how you process it, the story you're telling yourself. And the narrative I share is this. Your life is a best-selling movie, tending towards a happy ending. Every pain you're been through in your life, including colonization, are the suspense in the movie of your life. And that's why the main actor of the movie never dies. And we are the actors, we are still alive. So everything that has been done is for us. We can turn it around and flip it and make it into a beautiful story. Then, what is our parenting alignment charter? Husband and wife, if you ask them how do you intend to raise your child, they don't have a uniform template. So if husband says, daddy says, you can have candy, mommy says you can't have candy, already you have the conservatives and the liberal in the family, right? So the child is going to get confused. So parenting and charter, then what virus exists that must not be passed on? What are the self-sabotaging patterns that we have as parents that we must not pass to our children? We need to articulate them and we need to go through healing. So that's number 1. The number 2 recommendation that I would share, if we have to script children successfully in the diaspora, is child discovery and road mapping matrix. What does that mean? You do not pass a judgment on a Japanese child until age 6, which means you observe a child. Now, we need to learn to observe, and we need to create a perceptual code. A perceptual code is simple. It's a descriptive word that represents who your child is and your engagement system with that child. For example, if you say every child in your family is dash, what is that dash? If that dash is every child in this family is a royalty, right? Like my family, every child in the family is a royalty. Now, when they do something that is wrong, you cannot talk down on a royalty, right? To correct a royalty, you can't shout. Regardless of how you were raised. Now, if I talk to a child as a royalty, because in the Norwegian system, prison system, now they have very, very low crime rate. What happened? They noticed that every time they beat the prisoners and they incarcerated them, after 5 years of releasing them, they went to commit the same offense. So they came up with three things. They said, if you treat a human being like an animal, he will respond with the energy of a beast. If you treat a human being as a human being, he will respond back like a human being. But if you treat a human being like a royalty, he will respond back to you as a king or a queen. So they changed the prison system and turned it into a 5-star hotel. And so by doing that, they realized that crime rate dropped. Right? People left prison and became surgeons simply because they treated prisoners and restored their identity to them. So we need to analyze that and create a perceptual code. Ferocious curiosity preservation using the student approach. When you don't understand something about the African child, can we be curious instead of taking a side and becoming judgmental? Number 3 is we need to research, embrace, and replicate a template that works. It's called aggressive parenting education. I had to go and study the Japanese system, study the Chinese system, study the Jewish system, study the Indian system, because principles are universal. It's application that is different. If we don't have something, I am very shameless about it. I'll go and learn, I'll go and beg. I'll learn because I love to observe. So, what is what? How did it work? Why did it work? How can we replicate? How do we leverage? You see, in parenting children in the diaspora, leverage is very, very critical. You know, way back in Nigeria, they will tell you, young people will tell you, you know, I don't have to go to school. After all, Bill Gates dropped out of school. And I tell them, Bill Gates did not drop out from the university in your village. He dropped out of Harvard. To get admission to Harvard means that you have a measure of intelligence. And number two is mother secured a $1 million loan. So if your mother does not have a $1 million loan to give to you and secure your future, you better don't drop out of school. You know, so that's leverage. So what does that mean? It means if I go back to the same triangle, we now talk about African domestic education system, African village acculturation command centers, African specialized mentoring systems, African governance structures, and African wholeness system. Because we talk about our children are profiled in the schools. How come we don't have teachers in the schools who are Africans? How come we don't have social workers? How come we don't have school counselors in there? So these are things that systems resolve. You need to be very intentional. We need to be intentional about this. Number four is create a new village tribal ideology system. Now, I can't get into this, but I'll just explain it and summarize it. Now, you need to create what we call the family governance. What gaps exist? Who must we become? What new culture must we create? In creating the next generation of African communities that can script the next generation, I love to use this model that I built to say you now need to create different spheres, different command centers, so that every African child, anywhere they are, they can know where they belong and they can have mentors. So if you want to become maybe a management consultant, there is someone that you can be attached to who can mentor you literally, right? So you create what we call domestic educational system. I mean, my children, we have a domestic educational system in family because of who my children are going to become. So there is what we have a subject called the royalty. We study a particular individual every day. I'm in the US, but the curriculum is there, right? And that's why I started teaching a class called Ready for Life, where I take on African children virtually. I have a chain of teachers who are teaching them across different countries, and we're deploying the curriculum from ages 8 to ages 18. Now the parents, we have the first semester, 3 semesters in a year. The parents are feeding us back with massive testimonials on what is happening with those children, right? That is what we need to do. See, if we are not intentional, then if we get any result, we will know that that's the outcome we're prepared for. Because if we don't plan to succeed, then we are planned to fail, basically. And lastly, you have the same identification and casting. What that means is every parent needs to know their role, and we need to collaborate with them to win. Which means, for example, from ages 0 to 3, your role as a parent is scouting. Don't pass judgment. Just observe your child. Scout. A child is sending you a signal. Can you pick the signal? From ages 4 to 6, you are a model. When my son was 5, I used to have pot belly. And my son was having a conversation with my wife. And he said, when I grow older, my tummy will be as big as my daddy's tummy. That was the modeling I showed him. So I got into the gym and had to drop 14 kg. Right? So modeling, if we model competence, so when I hear parents say, my child does not do anything, all my children are cooking. So when I see parents say, my children don't mop the floor, what did you model before them? So modeling from ages 4 to 6, from 7 to 9, you become an instructor. That's where you design your family educational system. From 10 to 12, you need to become your child's friend, because that's the age you're likely going to lose your child as an African, because now they're becoming aware. From ages 13 to 18, you become a coach. And as a coach, you don't impose yourself. You help your student design strategy, and you collaborate with your child to win. Because from age 19, we say parenting is an 18-year curriculum. What happens from age 19 is your report card. From age 19, you are just a cheerleader. It's no longer I'd like to listen to you. When you have done a proper job, your child will listen to you. Let me tidy this up by saying that scripting the future of the African child is not just a prayer battle again, or individual parenting. It is now about your system's intelligence and tribal ideology in which the stronger and most desirable will win. So if we don't articulate who we are, then we have lost the right to begin to complain, because show me your template, try the template and see if it wouldn't work. Well, these are some of the latest innovations. I have scripted a child for success. I run the parenting system class in North America, then effective sexual education and personal transformation for the child, 3 semesters in a year. Thank you very much. I hope this has been helpful.